Hello and welcome to Countdown. This is the place to be if you want to find out all the news of the Australian Boomers and the Jayco Australian Opals preparations for London. We've got another bumper show this week. We're going to be catching up with NBL star and Boomers squad member Damian Martin. Jayco Opals assistant coach Peter Buckle is going to join us on the line. We're going to have the Countdown beatdown, the Countdown conversation. We're going to get some feedback from you, the viewers, wherever you're watching us right around the world. You can tweet us your questions. But as I will be every week during Countdown, I'm joined today by a very special guest. Two-time Olympian. He went to the Sydney Olympics in 2000, the Beijing Games in 2008. He won NBL, MVPs, championships, the whole box and dice. Chris Anstey, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Chris, tell us a bit about what you're doing in basketball these days. Yeah. You're looking resplendent in the Boomers shirt there, I must say.
Thank you. No, look, it's an exciting time of year, and I'm recently back with the Melbourne Tigers, so I suppose they approached me a few months ago, and I've spent a lot of time around the country, around the world playing basketball, and seen a lot of basketball environments, and they wanted to tap into helping the Melbourne Tigers re-establish themselves as becoming one of the most professional sporting clubs in the country, and certainly the most professional basketball club in the country. So that's what I'm up to. Fair to say we've probably had an inconsistent period of time, and we want to make sure that we re-engage young basketball players in Victoria, the associations they play for, and make sure we reach out to the fans and sponsors who we've lost over the last 4 years and make sure they're all welcome back.
A big job, no doubt. And I think you're just about for it. It's going to be interesting to get maybe a few more thoughts on that, but also more particularly some of the thoughts on what the Boomers and the Jayco Opals have to do in their preparations for London. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But before we do that, we're going to give you some of the latest news from both of the camps. Well, the Jayco Opals have wound up a marathon training camp at the AIS in Canberra this week. And after spending around about 15 of the last 17 days in our nation's capital, you can understand they probably need a bit of a break. But it's going to be back to business very soon because a squad of 14 is going to be heading to Europe for a 2.5-week tour. For details of that squad and, of course, of the tour itself, make sure you check out the Basketball Australia website. But things are just getting serious now for the Boomers as well, because this weekend they head into their first camp in preparation for the UYE series in Western Australia against the Chinese national team. The squad is going to be headlined by Matt Dellavedova, the college star, as well as a host of NBL talent, including Mark Worthington, Damian Martin and Adam Gibson. The tickets are on sale for this event right now. The details can be found on the UYE series website, which you see on your screen. But of course, the most important thing on the agenda in the road to London is the farewell series, basketball's road to London. We know the details by now. The Boomers are playing Greece in a 3-match series. The Jayco Opals are playing Brazil in a 3-match series. It all kicks off with a doubleheader at Hisense Arena in Melbourne on Sunday, June 24. The details are on the farewell series website. Tickets are available. Make sure you get along if you can.
Hi everyone, I'm Belinda Snell from the Jayco Australian Opals. How would you like to be a Jayco Opal for a day? Travel with the team, join us for lunch and sit on the bench for a shoot around before watching the game from your premium seat. You have a chance to bid for this amazing experience and loads more at the Farewell Series auction website. Go to auctions.basketball.net.au and make your bid.
So Chris, I want to get your thoughts about, I guess, going into training camp. I mean, it must be a highly competitive environment. What are the major things that individuals and the team are trying to get out of it?
I think it's just to make sure you're feeling as good as you possibly can. Everybody's coming off the back of a season, probably carrying small niggles. The structure and the philosophy of the group needs to be put in place. It's not about a learning of skills or an improvement of skills. It's about learning the systems, your defensive philosophies and strategies, and making sure you're developing relationships with guys on the group that you haven't spent the entire season with. And it's one of the things that we always found the European teams were really well at. They spend a lot more time together during the year. We struggle with that with all of our guys in Europe and in the States now, and it's a key period of time for that. It's also important not to break them down, so when we get to the Olympic Games, we're fatigued. So I'm sure they'll do a good job of it.
I mean, it was a challenging time for the players, I'm sure, because you know that there might be 14, 16, 20 of you in a squad, but there are only 12 spots on the plane. But tough for coaches as well, because they have to meld the group, but also make some of those difficult selection decisions. We're going to talk a bit about depth a bit later on, but even just thinking about it now, I mean, how do you fill those last couple of roster spots?
Yeah, I was always a big believer that if you're going to realistically, most coaches only play eight or nine players in an Olympic tournament. And I think what you need with those 10, 11 and 12 spots are someone who's a bit different, someone who can give you a different look as a team if things aren't going well with your starting group. I think if you replace same with same when you go to your bench, you get more of what you got if you're struggling. So you definitely want the ability to have different looks within the group. If you can do that, I think you become more dangerous and have the ability to change a game at any given time to your advantage. And
it might be an offensive player, it might be somebody who's more defensive minded, I guess.
Yeah, look, I suppose the analogy we used was going back to Sydney, my very first Olympics. I was of the opinion that it would have been great to have Simon Dwight on the squad. We had three guys who were very similar. We had Tony Ronaldson, Andrew Vlahov and Pat Reedy. So when we went to the bench, we got very similar type players. And I thought to have a Simon Dwight who looked absolutely different to the three of those guys might have just been something you can pull out every now and again to change the tempo of the game, change the look of our group. And hopefully flick the switch back into our favour and bring those starting guys back once we've got a little bit more consistency and got the game going the way we wanted it to.
Great analysis from Chris Anstey, two-time Olympian. We'll have more from Chris in a moment. But right now it's time to catch up with a man who was the 2011 Defensive Player of the Year in the National Basketball League, Perth Wildcats star, and he's hoping to be booking a spot on the plane to London along with a few of his Boomers teammates at the moment. Damian Martin is part of the Boomers squad and we caught up with him.
Perth Wildcat and Boomers star Damian Martin has a clear goal. Make it to London wearing the green and gold and leave no stone unturned in the process.
The first time I got to play for Australia in Perth, running out in front of my home crowd, it was one of the most special feelings I've ever had playing basketball and something I'll never forget. So, to go to another level and represent Australia at an Olympic Games, it'd just be a dream come true. I've literally dreamt of being an Olympian for 20 years now. And so if that's the case, then it'd just be fantastic, especially with this group of guys who I truly believe can do something special.
Helping the Wildcats to the NBL Grand Final and taking home the second Defensive Player of the Year accolade, Martin has enjoyed another impressive season, but injuries provided the London hopeful with an untimely hurdle, one that he's working overtime to scale.
I was in a moon boot for the last 4 weeks after game 2 I got put into it and I was allowed to go out of it for game 3, and then ever since then I've been in the moon boot up until 4 or 5 days ago. So you hope you get a month of good training under your belt before a camp like this, but unfortunately with time restrictions I only get a week and a half, but ideally I would have had longer, but I can't complain because I'm still a hope of making the first camp and who knows from there.
The dream of heading to London has been a long journey for Martin, and heading into the first Boomers camp in Perth, the challenge becomes real.
It's hard not to be a little bit nervous. I mean, it's been 3 years of preparation, going to the 4th year trying to represent Australia, and it's the Olympic campaign is the pinnacle of representing your country. So there's already some jitters, but in saying that you've got a week-long camp to prove yourself. There's 12 spots up for grabs, and hopefully I'll have my name read out at the end of the week.
With only 12 spots on the plane to London, Martin admits he's keeping a watchful eye on those players in the mix for the guard positions.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't trying to keep up to date with how other players in my position were going, whether it was Adam Gibson and Pete Crawford, someone like that in the NBL, or following some of the younger guys over in college or playing in Europe. So, it's been a long year to tell the truth, trying to put the Perth Wildcats first and foremost because we're in season, but in the back of my head, you're constantly thinking about the Olympic campaign and am I doing enough after training to make sure I'm going to be the best possible shape to give myself a spot. So it has definitely played on my mind, but hopefully it hasn't distracted me too much from my Wildcats commitments.
A defender of the highest calibre, Martin is looking forward to the potential battle with some of the world's best defensive players.
You're kidding if you don't want to match up against, we don't want to face the US during the Olympics, but it's always nice to go against the best in the world, and so if we come across America, it would be pretty cool to guard some of their players. But we played France last year, and just watching Tony Parker, he's phenomenal, and I think he's the best point guard in the world. So if we come across France, it'll be a hell of a battle, but it'll be a lot of fun matching up against them.
Great to catch up with Damian Martin there. 2011 and 2012 NBL Defensive Player of the Year, and one man who's a bit dirty, I didn't mention his Defensive Player of the Year, Chris Anstey is with me. Chris, what does Damian bring to the squad, and what do you think? Is that the key thing, the ability to just come into a game, change the momentum with some up-tempo defence and pressure?
Yeah, it's not even changing the momentum, it's just the ability from the minute you step on the floor to make the person who's guarding uncomfortable.
Yep.
And continue to be a physical presence on both ends of the floor all the time. And that's what the Wildcats are renowned for. They're a team that everybody in the league knows what they stand for. They stand for that physical presence for a full game, and they're probably the most consistent team in the league in that area, and he leads it.
Well, Chris, it's time now to put some pressure on you. Okay. You thought this was going to be really easy, but it's time for the Peak Sports Countdown Beatdown. You have 24 seconds to answer a couple of questions, and what our viewers can do is they can tweet in some questions to us. The details are on the screen at Basketball Australia, the Boomers or the Opals, and make sure you use the hashtag Beatdown so that your tweets get our attention. We've got a couple in this week, and I'll get started. Matt Hickey has tweeted into Basketball Australia. Chris, what players from the NBL and the WNBL will have the biggest impact on the Boomers and the Opals? And your time starts now.
I think with the Opals to start with, Liz Cambridge's game is much more suited to an international style than it is here in Australia. The referees let them play a bit more. I think that suits her perfectly. I love Sammy Richards. I think she's the best point guard we've got in this country and has the ability to run a team and get the right girl shots at the right time. And with the boys, so much comes down to the international guys. That I think Mark Worthington, for that leadership and the ability that he has to change a game, and his physical presence gives him the nod.
All right, well done. Very nicely done. I'll tell you what, you're a bit quicker than Drewy. He certainly does it. I think he had about 2 minutes rather than 24 seconds. And another question from Mookie, who's done quite a bit of work for the NBL over the last year or so, and he's tweeted in and asked, what was the best Boomers squad, or which tournament did you go to that had the best Boomers squad?
On paper you'd probably have to say Sydney, and we certainly had our best result. Luke Longley was a part of that and wasn't even a primary focus of the group offensively, but was such an anchor defensively. But having said that, I thought we actually played our best basketball in Beijing. I think we dropped our first game to Croatia, which was bitterly disappointing because we'd beaten them twice in the lead-up, but by the time we got to the end of the tournament, we'd beaten Lithuania by 30. We actually went into a game against the USA thinking that we stood, even if it's a 1 in 100, we stood some sort of a chance. So we were playing that sort of basketball.
All right. Well, interesting observations, and I understand Kobe went a bit nuts in the third quarter.
Yeah, he did.
Took it away.
We tried to make him a jump shooting team. We thought that levelled the game out a little bit. Unfortunately, made jump shots.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah,
these things happen, don't you? He played the best in the world. Well, thanks, Chris Anstey, of course, and congratulations to our 2 winners this week. A Peak Sports Boomers and or Opals, Jayco Opals prize pack is coming your way. Make sure you get in contact with us again. The Twitter handle's on the screen, and use the hashtag Beatdown. All right, and of course, the other thing you can do is you're in the running then to possibly even win a merchandise pack at the end of this series of Countdown. All right, time to move into the next phase, the Countdown Conversation. Well, it's now time for the Countdown Conversation, as I just mentioned, and that is brought to us by Spalding. Not only do we have our guest host in the studio with me, Chris Anstey, but we also have joining us on the line from Adelaide, Jayco Opals assistant coach Peter Buckle. Bucks, welcome to you.
Thanks, mate. Thanks very much.
Now, the idea of the Countdown Conversation to both Peter and to Chris and to everyone at home is we're focusing on the number of weeks there are left until the London Games. And we're up to the number 9 this week. So the feature, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the depth. We're going to look at going 9 deep and ask you both, firstly to Peter, how significant is the depth of this Jayco Opals squad, and how do you think the coaching staff, of which you're a part, is going to manage it?
Look, one of the strengths that we have is the depth in our program. And over the last couple of years with the likes of Liz Cambridge and Jenna O'Hay and there's Hannah Zavich, of course, and Rachel Jarry and the like have really bolstered the depth of the Opals, because we've still got just about all the seniors that went to 2008 in the Beijing Olympics still in our program. So we do have some significant depth, and right now we're a squad of 15, and it's a difficult job to get from 15 to 12.
Chris, I'll ask you the same question, and just picking up on Peter's point about the depth. I mean, the Opals are going to have a really serious task getting down from 15 to 12. I mean, how tough do you think the task will be for the Boomers?
Yeah, really difficult. And like I said before, sometimes there's always going to be unlucky players, and sometimes it's not even about picking the best 12 players. Yep. It's about picking the 12 guys that fit, because the depth in a tournament like the Olympic Games is obviously vitally important if you get injured. Realistically, you'll only play 8 or 9, and I think it's probably even more important to make sure that your stars and the guys who have that role where they're playing their 28 to 32 minutes a game are really playing well. the depth becomes your insurance, and you want to make sure, again, there's a different look if things aren't looking good with the style of play you start a game with.
And I suppose it's also tricky, and I'll address this to Peter, with tournament play as well, and particularly with the Opals, who we know won't look at any game as being an easy win necessarily, but they're probably they're fairly superior to some of the lesser teams. And I guess, Peter, you've got to manage situations, as Chris said. I mean, if somebody gets hurt or if there's an issue with somebody, if an illness might strike or something, you've got to have some of these backup players ready to go. So you have to be able to manage them and actually get them some court time, so that through the course of the tournament, they're not just, I guess not just sitting at the end of the bench, and then when the cobwebs are too thick, when they actually get called upon in a big moment.
Yeah, look, you do. You've got to have that balance. The Olympics, the Olympics is an 8-game tournament, so over that period of 8 games, at that level of intensity and physicality, rotating players becomes paramount, so that you can last the full time and get to the middle rounds and have everybody in good shape and healthy and playing some minutes really well. So in the earlier rounds, it's most important that the bench is on the floor and supporting obviously the main crew. And Chris made mention about you're probably going to rotate 8 or 9, particularly as you get closer in quarterfinals, semi-finals, and so on. But in the earlier rounds, if there's opportunities, you need to make sure that the whole bench is being rotated, because otherwise you're simply burning out the minutes that you've got for your top 7 or 8.
And Chris, you've obviously been part of that higher point of the pointy end of the rotation, and you must know how important it is.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think with the Boomers, it's probably a slightly different situation, and the Opals have done a fantastic job placing themselves on the world stage where they're probably afforded that opportunity. I think the Boomers won't have that. I think every game we play will be a dogfight. Yeah. Looking at the draw, the one that we may get to rotate through is playing the UK or England. They're not renowned for their basketball prowess, and you'd hope to be able to rest some of the guys during that game and count it as a win. But other than that, as we proved in Beijing, a loss in the first round, it killed us, and we crossed over against the USA. So, I'm just a big believer. I was probably changing topic. The biggest distraction in Olympic Games is the Olympic Games themselves, and the boys have to make sure that they're locked into that absolutely locked into that first game. And not be thinking about rest or not be thinking about rotations, just be thinking about winning the first game when they turn up there.
The Sporting Countdown conversation right here on Countdown. And thanks to our special guest on the phone, Jayco Opals assistant coach, Peter Buckle. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, guys.
And that just about wraps it up for another episode of Countdown this week. A big thanks, of course, to my co-host, Chris Anstey, who's here with us. Next week, joining me in the studio will be Alison Tranquilli, an Opals legend, of course, in her own right, as well as being a star of the WNBL for many, many years. Thanks must go to our sponsors, Jayco, the Australian Sports Commission, Peak Sports, Sporting and Sporting Pulse. And make sure you jump online and check out the website, www.thefarewellseries.com.au, to get all your information about tickets, about the games between the Jayco Opals and Brazil and the Boomers and Greece coming to Victoria a little bit later this year, later in June. Thanks a lot for joining us again on Countdown. We'll see you next week.